This week on Writers, Inc.
For me, there were many moments along the way, almost stepping stones, but this was more than a stepping stone. You know, this was finding you were stepping onto the world's most amazing island, which you expected to be a pebble, because it certainly has catapulted me into a whole other world, getting to meet my writing heroes, you know, getting to know Anthony Horowitz and Charlie Higson, getting to meet all of these amazing Bond readers and fans. So it's certainly taken me into a whole other kind of stratosphere or bondosphere of writing. J.K.
Rowling was nearly homeless when she wrote the first Harry Potter book. Stephen King penned Carrie in a small desk wedged between a washer and dryer. James Patterson worked in advertising and famously crafted the Toys R Us theme song long before becoming an author. Join New York Times bestseller J.D. Barker and a panel of industry powerhouses as they pull back the curtain on some of the world's most prolific authors. Where did they start? What is their process? The biggest names in publishing all have origin stories, all have tips and secrets. What does it take to consistently top the bestseller lists and become a household name? Get your notepad out, school's in session. This is Writers, Inc.
Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
Patrick O'Donnell.
Kevin Tumlinson.
And this is JD Barker. I'm watching the video here, and I'm pretty sure that Kevin just sang the alphabet song in his head just to make sure he was like saying his name in the right order there.
I have a list. I have I typed up a list. I'm like, okay, I'm after these people, so I'll go then.
Alphabetical order is hard.
It's been a weird morning. I just shot video of our robot dog. So we've got one of those Astros from Amazon, and it discovered our chickens. Because they're in the house right now. So my wife's got them in her office, and they're in like one of those plastic like kiddie swimming pools. She just put some like, I don't know what she's got, like wood chips or something down at the bottom, but like they're all in her office just kind of hanging out in there. And one of the things that they programmed Astro to do is basically figure out where the humans in the house actually hang out, and then the robot tries to hang out in those same places. So you know, if you're in the living room all the time, the Astro will kind of use that as his hangout spot. So when he's not on his charger, he'll head in there and that kind of thing. But I guess he sees the body heat. Like, I don't know how they actually figure that out. I'm guessing it's heat related, but he sees the heat from the chickens. So he keeps going into my wife's office and just like staring into this swimming pool with the chickens running around. And it looks so weird. But like my wife, they started jumping out of the swimming pool. So my wife got in the habit of closing her office door when she's not actually in there. So I just got a video of Astro basically getting off his charger, and he runs down the hallway, goes to her door, and the door is closed. And he's just like looking around at the door, you know, like, because he can't reach the doorknob. Then he gets aggravated and just kind of goes away. But it's like it's funny because it acts like a real dog. Like it's pissed off. It can't get
if it's going for the like real dog experience, it's going to sit outside that door and whine until someone lets it in.
It doesn't whine yet, but I would not be surprised if they program something like that.
That's a firmware update down the road.
It probably is. Speaking of firmware updates, Patrick, you want to tell us about Cop Camp?
Hey, everybody. Thank you, JD. Yeah, I am going to be co-hosting something called Cop Camp. The official title is Cops and Writers Interactive Conference. It's going to be in Appleton, Wisconsin, June 1st through the 4th. And what this is, it's going to be at the Fox Valley Police Academy, which is super high speed. It was built, I think, in 2016. So in Police Academy years, it's very, very new. It has all the latest bells and whistles. They have a little city out in back where they have a full-size bank, a motel, a convenience store. So you could practice like different scenarios. The SWAT team goes in and does, you know, different stuff. And they have an airplane. They have an actual full-size jet that the FBI's HRT team uses like 4 times a year. They go and do, it's called tubular assaults, going into like a tube-shaped thing, you know, like potential hijacking stuff, whatever. But what this is, we're going to have, it's going to be about 30 to 40 people. I'm keeping it small because I want it to be interactive. That's the big thing. I want it to be interactive where the students all have a chance to do hands-on stuff. You can do as much or as little as you want. And I also have some really good guest speakers coming. I have Honoré Corder, John Norris. He was a California game warden that was hunting down cartel members. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy story, but he's a very good public speaker. Annie Schwartz, she's the reporter that broke the Jeffrey Dahmer story. She's a Pulitzer Prize nominee. And I have Adam Richardson. He runs the Writers Detective Bureau. He's a detective out in California, and he's been helping writers for a long time. He's got a podcast and some classes. He's going to be there. And I also have Sharon Rick. She's a retired DA in Wisconsin, so she can kind of give the legal side. So this is for people who, one of the most common questions I get asked when I'm running the Cops and Writers stuff is, I'm not a cop. I don't know any police people, but I want to write authentic police stories. How can I do this? So I came up with this, where you can actually there's going to be, they have a track with water cannons that'll try and shoot you off the track. They have, you could do like little mock squad chases. There's, it's called a FATS machine. It's a firearm simulator machine where you're immersed. You have a gun, and the gun is the actual weight, feel, trigger pull that an actual, like, say, a Glock or a SIG is, and you're in scenarios. And it could either be very benign or they can really ramp it up. And it's shoot, no shoot situations.
When is this again?
June 1st through the 4th.
Okay, cool. Yeah, these kind of things are fun. I think a lot of people haven't actually tried this. A lot of writers, like we get out there, we write these stories, but like until you actually put yourself in the shoes of a cop, it's very difficult to really get that right. And like I actually did something like this down in Tampa, and the first thing that I noticed, like they put me in the full on like SWAT gear, like that stuff is heavy. Like if you're wearing a bulletproof vest, a helmet, the weapons, everything that you're carrying, like just moving around in that is crazy heavy. And like, that's something I try to bring across in the stories now, just try to describe it a little bit more. So I think anytime an author can get immersive, it's useful.
Yeah, we'll also do CSI stuff, K9, and we'll have the SWAT team come out. So like you said, you could kind of like try on some of the stuff and get a feel for it at least. They will not allow us to do live fire with guns for insurance reasons, but there are ranges in the area, and I'll be more than happy to take people. There's writers that have never fired any kind of gun before.
We've talked about this. I never have. I need to fire a gun. I've only fired paintball guns and BB guns. I've never fired a gun.
That's the same. It's the same. It's just faster and louder.
I took Nathan Van Coops out. He's a pilot down in Tampa. He's a writer. And we did the trade-off where he said, okay, I'll take you flying and you take me shooting. And I'm like, absolutely. So we went shooting, and the guy was a great shot. And he's only shot one other time, like a long time ago in his life. And a lot of that is because you don't have any bad habits. Like when I was in the academy, we had some guys that they never fired a weapon before. And some of them wound up being really, really good shots because they didn't come with all the baggage of, I've been shooting since I was 16, which I have been, but I had some bad habits that I had to break.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that starts June 1st through the 4th. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a blast. We got people coming from literally all over the world. I have a writer that's coming from New Zealand, so she can experience this.
All right. We'll put a link in the show notes in case anybody wants to register for that, and let us know how it goes.
Very cool. Thank you.
Kevin, what's in the news?
Well, first, the spirit of JP is upon me. Gen Zers are bookworms, but they say they're shunning ebooks. And despite being known as tech-savvy generation, Gen Z prefers printed books over ebooks, with 80% of books purchased by UK readers aged 13 to 24 being print books between November 2021 and 2022. Social media trends like book talk, hashtag book talk on TikTok have contributed to the boom in book sales, with the U.S. hitting a record of over 843 million units sold in 2021. Gen Z readers find value in the tactile experience of reading physical books, citing reasons such as reduced eye strain, better focus, and supporting local bookstores, which we know, of course, that makes JP's heart glad. So, and I'm right there with him.
This whole story made me very happy. Just to see people making that switch. I think when like the Kindle first came out, readers just sort of jumped all over it, for a lot of reasons. But I think a lot of people, and I'm one of them, have I've kind of gone back in the other direction. I prefer holding a physical book in my hand and reading it. Mainly because if I'm reading on my phone or something else, I've got messages popping in, I've got emails going on. This is happening, that's happening, and it's not relaxing in any way. So the only time I use a Kindle nowadays is if I'm traveling, and I don't want to take 2 or 3 books in my suitcase. I'm noticing this with my daughter too. She loves her iPad, like to the point where we hide it from her. Like the only time she's allowed to really use it, if she goes on an airplane, she's allowed to take it, or a long car ride, she can take it, but otherwise she doesn't get to use it. But the other day we were at a restaurant and we had it with us. And I tried to get her to read a book on there, and like she was totally uninterested in reading a book on there. Like she likes having the physical book. And I don't know if that's just a young kid thing or if it's just something that's coming around to that generation too. She's all over it when it comes to games, and that kind of stuff. But like when it comes to reading a book, she wants a physical book.
I find that fascinating because, I'm slow to change. So it took me a long time to go to Kindle because I hate everything. It took me a long time to go to Mac. It takes me a long time I'm like, I just like what I like and I'm not changing. So I finally went to Kindle and now I don't read physical books anymore. And just because of the space, like, I'm like, oh, look how much space I'm saving in my house. Because there is literally no more room in my house for books. Like we probably have like 7 barristers and a bunch of bookcases. And I'm like, there's nowhere to put books. I'm going to have to buy a new house if I want more books. Yeah. So I've gone totally electronic, like strictly from a practical sense. So I just find that fascinating that younger kids are going, or the Gen Zs are going to physical again.
Well, it's funny because my kids are all Gen Zers and they love physical books. I've got a Kindle. My wife's got a Kindle. I love Kindles. It's just so easy and convenient. Like what you're saying, JD, like for traveling and everything else, you just throw it in your bag and you're good to go.
Backlighting and big font for us old folks.
Yeah, big print, please. But yeah, my kids, they're dragging around books. And I I did some research on this, and Gen Z buys more vinyl than millennials. They want albums.
You see, cassettes are coming back too. I'm like, what is going on with that? Cassettes are making a resurgence.
Mixtape.
Oh, God, no.
Everything old is new again. Polaroid, that's also popular. Okay. Amazon's ending of Kindle newsstand could severely impact sci-fi and fantasy magazines. Amazon's decision to end the Kindle newsstand program in 2023 and shift magazines to Kindle Unlimited could severely impact science fiction and fantasy magazines, as Kindle subscriptions have become a significant part of their overall circulation. Kindle Unlimited's payment model, which is based on the number of pages read, could lead to uncertain revenues for magazine publishers, as readers often do not read every page of a magazine and may not finish certain stories. Sci-fi and fantasy magazines are trying to adapt to the change by urging former Amazon subscribers to migrate to other subscription services, exploring Kindle Unlimited for magazines, or promoting direct subscriptions with publishers. This isn't just sci-fi fantasy, by the way. I mean, I've talked to some folks who were really dependent on that program for magazine subscription income. So it's a hit across that industry.
I read this and I was like, what exactly is Kindle Newsstand? I've never heard of this before.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So I had to look it up, and it's obvious. It's something that's, it's been there for a while, but I haven't seen any real press on it. I'm on the Amazon site probably a couple times a day. I'm addicted to buying stuff on Prime, and I don't even think I've seen anything come across on there. And frankly, in looking at it, like I would have probably used it, because one of my biggest complaints, like I recently subscribed to Wired magazine, the physical one, and I get it at my house. And one of the things that I actually hate about magazines, and this reminded me of that, is, you'll read like the first 2 pages of a story and then like it's continued on page 43 or something. So you've got to flip to the back of the magazine to finish it up. And like that kind of stuff drives me insane. And I'm guessing on this platform, you could actually read the entire story all at once. It's too bad. Hopefully there'll be some other, evolution of this. Maybe they'll find some other way to bring in that revenue and offset it.
There are definitely other newsstand types programs out there. Apple has their newsstand built into the News app, and I actually use that because I get it as a part of a greater subscription to a whole bunch of stuff that they offer. I'll use that for reading magazines. Unfortunately, they tend to try to follow the format of print magazines, JD. So I think sometimes they do actually interrupt your reading experience. But overall, I like being able to clip those things and put them in, because you can export that article as a PDF or something, or save it for later reading and things like that. So there's some advantages there. I can't do print magazines anymore. They just stack up for for months. I won't get to them for months. I have a stack to my left that I've had for like 6 years, and I've yet to crack any of them open.
I wonder if Gen Zs are reading these.
Yeah.
Are they reading the physical ones?
Yeah.
I used to read the physical sci-fi and fantasy magazines before they went digital, but I've never used the Amazon site. I always read them direct, and most of them have a model where you can read some of the stories free, and then there's a bigger name or something, you pay for that story per story. So yeah, it never would have occurred to me to look on Amazon for those, because I just went from physical to direct subscriptions from the site. So yeah, I might have read them if I'd known about it.
And there's the problem again. Moving on, turns out that America's most, quote, recession-proof business is bookstores. Bookstores are projected to be the most recession-proof type of U.S. business in 2023, with a 43% increase in the number of bookstores during the latter part of the pandemic. Bookstores experienced steady wage growth during both the pandemic at plus 16% and the Great Recession at plus 13%, and have moderate startup costs of around $75,000. The least recession-proof businesses include furniture stores, women's clothing boutiques, and this one surprised me, taxi and rideshare services, used car dealerships, and housing construction companies, as people tend to delay big or unnecessary purchases during a recession. And I have to add JP's note that the spirit of JP is standing on their soapbox telling you that supporting your local bookstores and finding a way to form a local community between booksellers and authors is the future.
I think this is great. I love the fact that bookstores did well, but at the same time, we were all locked in our houses. What are you going to do with that time? And I'm guessing if they were to, run a similar study, video game, was probably up. The streaming services people were paying, out the yin yang for, because you just ran out of content. I'm really curious to see where this is, 2 years, 3 years down the road. Hopefully after everything is back to, some type of semblance of normal again. Hopefully they stick with it. But, I think we've seen it even like in Facebook ads and click through and stuff like that. People were reading insane amounts of content when they were locked in their house because there was literally nothing else to do other than talk to their family. And a lot of people don't want to talk to their family. They'd rather bury themselves in a book. So I'm curious where this is going to be in a couple more years.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised about the women's clothing thing, because I don't think I've shopped in a store for 4 years. I've become like an online women's catalog shopper. Remember you said that I have the catalogs and you flip floor? And I'm like, oh my goodness, yes. I've become like a grandmother. I order catalog clothes now.
So over the Christmas, on the run up to Christmas last year, Amazon sent out a catalog that reminded me so much of like the old Sears and Roebuck catalog. Of just random things that they collected and put in here and said, you can find this on the site. So I think maybe they also sense that people are looking for that more tactile experience.
Yeah.
There are actually, I researched this because we got one of those catalogs too. And it turns out Amazon's actually got multiple catalogs out in different formats. So it's based on your buying habits from Amazon. That's basically what they send you. So like the one that we typically get the most is a toy catalog. It's all toys from
So do
Amazon.
I. That's weird.
Yeah, but they've also got one
catalog every week now. They're like, here, buy more clothes, please.
They've got another one that's geared towards women's fashion, another one towards men's fashion. So based on your buying habits on Amazon, they're targeting. But yeah, as soon as I saw it, my daughter brought it in to show me all these toys in the book that came in the mail, and I was like, hey, this is a Sears catalog. I remember the Sears catalog.
Yeah,
that was awesome. It was like 500 pages of random stuff you didn't know you needed.
I kind of loved it.
I did too.
Getting this in the mail was like a nice little nostalgic treat, and then I didn't use it to order anything, but I was glad to have the book. I kept it. It's in that pile of magazines off to my left.
Yeah, I never liked
One thing to remember is that bookstores sell more than just books. And I don't know if this is factored at all, because like the bookstore that I go to, like our local bookstore, I mean, they have maple syrup. They have, pastries. I bought a pound of ground beef there yesterday. There's the farmer's market that comes by every Sunday. They're pretty close, and they have a relationship with the farmer who sells this stuff. So they have it frozen back in their freezer, and you can buy frozen ground beef. So it's really good.
I think you're making the case. You're making JP's case, though, I think, with that, because what that is now it becomes a community thing, which
Absolutely.
is much more what places like that were before Barnes and Noble and others kind of came on the scene. So you get an eclectic blend of local culture that way. So it's that much more of an argument that you should be supporting local bookstores.
Yeah, if I'm going to throw my money for that, I'd rather do that.
I don't think the local bookstore is ever going to be my target for lunch meat. Like I don't think I'll be able to make that.
You're not living
back there. Well, why not?
Yeah, that's a little. Yeah, that's sort of like buying candy bars at Lowe's or Home Depot. Like I'll go in to buy something. If you buy a Snickers bar off the rack and then you get it in the car and it's as hard as a rock because it's been there for 4 years. Yeah, I'm not going there.
I'm probably going to buy lunch meat anywhere I find it, honestly. So I'm good.
Fair enough.
Hey, you got to watch your cholesterol, mister. So, you got to.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
He's good now with his cholesterol. He's got that fixed.
Yes. We're very proud of him.
Awesome. Okay. Before we get to our interview, we want to give a wonderful shout out to our sponsor, Master Writer. Master Writer is a powerful collection of writing tools and reference assembled in one easy-to-use program. Included are word families, phrases, synonyms, rhymes, definitions, figures of speech, pop culture, a searchable Bible, and intensifiers, a unique collection of intense descriptive words. Why struggle to find the right word when you can have all the possibilities in an instant? While a computer can't compete with the mind and imagination of a writer, the mind can't compete with the word choices of Master Writer. When the two work together, great things happen. Check it out today at masterwriter.com. So JD, who's up this week?
This week we've got Kim Sherwood. She's a novelist and lecturer in creative writing at the University of Edinburgh. Her latest book is in the James Bond universe, and it's called Double or Nothing. So here she is, Kim Sherwood.
Kim Sherwood, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Actually, I was going to start out with Kim Sherwood. So I'm going to ask you a question that I usually ask towards the middle or end of an interview, but I'm going to start out with this question. Where were you and what were you doing when you got the news that you'd be writing in the James Bond universe?
Well, I suppose there were two moments, really. The first was I was just at work. I was teaching, and I was actually having a really stressful day. My agent called me, and I bored on about my stressful day, and then eventually she said there was a reason I was calling. The Fleming Estate would like to talk to you about writing Bond, and I honestly thought this was a practical joke. I was just in my office at work going, what? I was mishearing. So that was the first I heard of it, and they invited me to send them some ideas. I wrote them a letter with some ideas, and they'd enjoyed my first novel. They knew I was a fan, but they also asked, or my agent suggested, that I send anything I had that sort of demonstrated how much I love Bond, because of course this is the Fleming's family legacy.
Sure.
It's really important to them that that you're a big fan yourself. And luckily I had a bit of homework I'd done when I was 13, a school report that my mum had kept. And it was homework. Our English teacher asked us to write about an author we admire, and I'd made this whole booklet on Ian Fleming with pull-out flaps and illustrations.
Wow, when you were 13.
Yeah, so I photocopied that and I sent that to the Fleming family along with my ideas. And I just said this would literally be a lifelong dream come true. And they liked the ideas, and we met for lunch. But the moment I knew that it was really happening was on another exciting night. I was shortlisted for the Sunday Times Young Writer of the Year Award, which is a sort of big deal here for young writers. And I was at the award ceremony at the London Library. And my agent took me to one side and said, I've just had news. The Flemings want you. We're doing it. And it was amazing. And then as it happened, I didn't win the award, but I was going around with the biggest grin on my face. Everybody thought I was the world's most gracious loser. But I was just so over the moon. But I couldn't tell anybody. It had to be a secret. So for a long time, I had to keep it a secret.
So was this the light bulb moment? Was this the moment in your writing career when you knew that, hey, I've made it. This can be a viable career for me. This is going to catapult me, into a different, universe. Yeah. Was that in your mind, or has that happened before your writing career, or what did that look like?
Question. I think you've probably had other writers say this too, but for me, there were many moments along the way, almost stepping stones. But this was more than a stepping stone. This was finding you were stepping onto the world's most amazing island, which you expected to be a pebble, because it certainly has catapulted me into a whole other world, getting to meet my writing heroes, getting to know Anthony Horowitz and Charlie Higson, getting to meet all of these amazing Bond readers and fans. So it's certainly taken me into a whole other kind of stratosphere or bondosphere of writing.
Bondosphere, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and there are these little moments, it's in some ways it's like a whirlwind, and then there are moments where I try and stop and pause and drink it in, because there are these moments where it all feels very real suddenly, and I feel incredibly lucky. So launching Double or Nothing at the British Library was one of them, which is my favorite building in the world, and to be sitting there in the British Library about to be interviewed by Charlie Higson with a martini in my hand and 150 people in the audience, I really did stop and think, wow, this is my life. So that was a pretty amazing moment. And there have been moments like that along the way, attending, they do a special film premiere for the Fleming family and they bring along their writers. So attending that with Anthony and Charlie and all of us going off in a corner and talking about how challenging it is to write Bond villains. I feel like I was floating outside of my body and looking down and thinking, wow. God, if my 13-year-old self could see me now,
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. It really is. So you're a professor at university. What did your students say when you told them, it's like, yeah, your teacher here is going to be writing James Bond books? What kind of reaction did you get?
It was really funny because for a long time it was secret, as I said, and my students would say, what are you writing? What are you working on? And this was during lockdown, so it was online teaching. A lot of my students are American, and they would ask me, what are you working on? And I'd say, actually, it's a secret. I'm not allowed to say. And I would call it my commercial project. I don't know why I kept saying, just my commercial project. Like I have a kind of side hustle selling socks or something. But my American students particularly latched onto this idea. One of them said to me, are you ghostwriting for Harry and Meghan? And they were completely convinced that was the only sort of secret a British writer could have. And nothing I said could move them off this idea. So I think they were possibly slightly disappointed that I wasn't ghostwriting for Harry and Meghan. But when I finally could tell all the students, it was so lovely. They were all so excited. I walked into the room the day after. It was the Monday after it had been announced, and it was in all the press here, national press over the weekend, the book deal and everything. And I went into class and they all gave me a round of applause. So that was very sweet.
That you win coolest teacher ever award. That's what I think. Yeah, that's right. My teacher writes James Bond books. All right. So the big question, what did you do to prepare yourself to write a James Bond novel?
Oh, well, that's a good question. In some ways, I've been preparing all of my life because, wherever I go, I'm always thinking, if you were a spy and you had to sort of get a message secretly to someone in this hotel, where would you go? And what would be your exit? And so I'm always kind of constructing those stories.
Okay.
But when I found out that it was actually happening, I reread all of the books, rewatched all of the films. And I was looking for, with the books, I was looking for threads that Ian Fleming had set running that perhaps he hadn't tied off, that just intrigued me, or I felt I could modernize or adapt in a certain way. Because the brief from the Flemings, the sort of two things they wanted was to modernize it, so bring it into the 21st century on the page, and to broaden out the cast of characters and to have a kind of ensemble cast of 00 heroes. So I was looking for, of course, any mention that Fleming has of other 00s, but also thinking, how can I bring this 00 section into the modern day? What can I do with those essentials? Because I think there are certain things that you have to have in a Bond story for it to feel like a Bond story.
Right.
So how can I bring them into the 21st century on the page? And then where might there be opportunities for me to maybe do something new or something that hasn't been done before? So I was kind of looking for those threads I could pull on and looking for any new space that I could occupy.
Okay. You know, I was thinking right away I would have to rent an Aston Martin and drive that around for a while. Yeah.
Oh, if only.
Yeah. In your book, I know you have, it's an Alpine. Did you take it out for a spin?
Well, my terrible confession is that I can't actually drive, which I realize is awful for a bond writer. But when the head of the Fleming Estate collects Alpine cars, she's an amazing woman. And she said to me, could you make the car an Alpine? Could 003's car be an Alpine? So I said, yes, absolutely, I'd love to. But for my writing process, it will be essential that someone takes me out in a sports car for a day.
Absolutely.
That'll be a really inherent part of the process.
Yes.
So I was very lucky. An actual racer took me out in the Alpine in Edinburgh. But it was really funny because at that point, it was still a secret. So he'd been told I was a VIP. And his colleagues were sort of, imagining that I was there to buy the car. And he was taking me out. And he said to me, so what do you do? And I thought, what am I going to say? This is such a weird scenario from his perspective. I can't even drive, but I'm looking at buying one of these cars, it seems. So I said, oh, well, I'm writing a book about cars. And then he looked a bit confused and said, but you can't drive. So yes, that is true. That is true. It's going to be quite a limited book about cars. But we went out. And then I thought I'd better deflect. I've been too obvious. So I asked him loads of questions about how accurate Fast and Furious is to throw him off the scent.
Sure. See, you are a spy. Look at that. You're deploying spy techniques. Look at you.
So he took me out, and for those who don't know, Edinburgh, the centre is very cobbled old streets, very windy. So we were going quite slowly, and the car's very low slung. So you really feel that vibration through your body. And that was really helpful for the writing. So you get that sense of what's it like just in your bones to be in this car. And then we got out to a straight road, and without telling me, he just gunned it. And I left my skeleton, somewhere blocked back. And it was just so fun. I'd never been in a sports car before. It was so fun. I would say, could we just do that again? We do that again. And I'm writing notes like it goes really, really, really fast to try and just to kind of get those details in. So yes, my next car will be an Alpine.
Very good. So another part of any James Bond story is the exotic locales. There's always globe hopping. Did you do anything to prepare yourself that way? Did you tell the Fleming Estate, hey, I've got to go to this exotic location? I have to get there.
I demand Goldeneye in Jamaica.
Yes.
Well, it was a really challenging time in some ways to write a Bond story because I was writing it through. We had 3 lockdowns here in the UK.
Oh, okay, sure.
Where you just couldn't leave your home for some of it, or go beyond your block, and trying to write a story that's all about travel and freedom and escape. When you're just stuck in the 4 walls was a challenge, but it also was in some ways, I think, quite a life-saving escape for me because I was imagining myself in all of these exotic locations around the world. But it did present a challenge for research. Usually for my research, I'd always want to go somewhere. So I used partly locations that I'd been to before. So the Berlin sections were drawing on past trips to Berlin. So things like that, I was thinking, okay, well, what have I kind of already got in my tool bag I can use? And then for places that I couldn't go, I'll always try and, read as much as I can, research as much as I can, and talk to people who've been to those places. And I'm very lucky that my dad is a tour manager for rock and roll bands. So he's been.
Oh, really? That's a great job. That sounds cool. At least.
Great job.
Yeah.
So he's been anywhere in the world that they play music, basically. So I'd text him and I'd say, have you been to any, post USSR states that are related to the space industry? And he'd say, yeah, what do you want to know? And I'd say, what do the hotels smell like? And then he would give me those details, because it's those details that I think make something come alive, and that Ian Fleming was so good at, those vivid journalistic details.
I totally agree. So does he just go around with different rock bands, or is it a specific rock band that he is attached to? Many
all of my life. So when I was younger, it was Depeche Mode and Susie and the Banshees and that whole era. And now he's out with Louis Tomlinson, so completely different genre.
Oh yeah.
32nd Mars. So yeah, all over the world and all over the musical spectrum.
Wow, that is so cool. Love it. So, I think it's a tough spot for you to be in. Okay, now it's great. Ian Fleming's estate contacts me and I'm going to write these James Bond books. But on the surface, that seems incredible. It's extraordinary, and it is. But then after the excitement wears down a little bit, was there a part of you that's like, wow, this is going to be a tough spot? Did you feel any kind of pressure to deliver this James Bond book? Yeah. And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of pressure. I think I was really lucky that it was a secret for so long and that it was in lockdown. So I couldn't even be tempted to tell people I was seeing, because that secret, I think in some ways it helped me pretend that this was just me. And I've been imagining that I could write Bond all of my life. So this, it was almost like playing out a fantasy or an imaginary game when you're a kid, Right. And that helped take the pressure off. Once the news was released, and that was when I was just coming towards editing the book and finishing it up, then the pressure really ratcheted up, because I went from being, completely secret and anonymous to having all these opinions. I remember the news was released, and that weekend, one of our national newspapers did a big double spread asking other writers what they would do if they were me. So then I was reading this double spread, looking at all these, these names I really respect.
Oh boy.
Thinking, oh, that is a good idea. And oh God, I've got something quite different than that. So then you do have other people's views, and of course all of the fans. James Bond belongs to everybody, so sure. Everybody feels that ownership. Everybody has a sort of anxiety, I think, around, is Bond in good hands? Will this character that we love be looked after? Mm-hmm. So there is a pressure to that, but I think it's a privilege as well.
Yes. So when you were writing the story, how did you balance this into a Kim Sherwood novel, but keeping the spirit of Ian Fleming alive, with your writing? How did you do that?
That was really important to me. I wanted to honor Fleming's vision, mm-hmm. while bringing it into the modern day. So I thought about, I can't write like Ian Fleming. Only Fleming can write like Fleming.
Right.
I can only write like me. But I thought about where are our points of commonality. And because I loved Fleming's writing since I was a teenager, as I said, I was really influenced by his writing. So I tried to think about, well, what were those influences? I think some of Fleming's imagery is very uncanny and unsettling and shocking and vivid, and I wanted to bring that in. How he uses an omniscient point of view to enter into different characters' perspectives. I wanted to bring in that kind of sense of multiple voices. So I looked at our shared DNA of our styles, and then I thought, and where can I sort of bring in myself? And a lot of it was just thinking about, what have I always found exciting in terms of spy stories, in terms of adventure stories? What have I always kind of fantasized if one day I had the chance to write about? So that's where a lot of the, particularly the Berlin sections, which kind of almost draws on the Cold War history, mm-hmm. which I find really fascinating, and meeting in Hotel Adlon and, all of those things, that really draws on a lot of my kind of interests and what really grabs my imagination about spy fiction.
Okay. Now, if Double or Nothing goes to theaters, would you want to write the screenplay?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow. Well, people will know, of course, that the Broccoli family and the Fleming family look after the separate sides of it. So mm-hmm. They, of course, they have a really positive working relationship, but they let each other kind of get on with their own things. But if it did, I think I would certainly find it strange someone else writing my characters. I realize that's what I'm doing to Ian Fleming, so perhaps that sounds hypocritical. but to me, it's like they've lived in my head for so long. It's like they're my family. So to let them go to someone else would be, I think, quite surreal. And I really love writing in those voices and getting to do more of their dialogue. Would be really exciting, I think. So yeah, I think if the opportunity was ever there, I'd certainly feel strange about someone else doing it.
Okay. Now, music is a part of any James Bond movie. It's huge. did you play a bunch of, music from all the different James Bond movies while you were writing or before you wrote the book?
Yeah, I do. I use, on Spotify, there's like public playlists.
Mm-hmm.
I use, someone in America made this James Bond playlist, and that's just the one I alighted on. It's not in chronological order. It's in their own order that they've chosen, the curator of the list. And I listen to that every time I write 00 or I edit. I listen to it just on a loop. So whoever curated this playlist must think, who is this girl in the UK just obsessively listening to my playlist? To the point that, Spotify does that, your year wrapped. Somehow the algorithm didn't work out that what I was doing was listening to James Bond. So it said, your favorite genre is easy adult standards.
Okay.
Which I felt was an insult to Tom Jones. But for me, listening to the music is really integral just to feeling that, that electricity that you feel in the cinema when the theme
Absolutely.
First, that's what I'm trying to capture. So the music really helps with that.
I agree. Were you sipping some Bollinger or a martini that was shaking that stir?
There have been moments.
Okay.
We had some very nice martinis at the launch, which they put out on the sort of stage for us. And the interviewer asked me a question. Are you afraid that some of the right-wing media might take against some of the more perhaps progressive elements that you've put into the book? So I did like a comedy sip of my martini. I was like, oh, let me think about that. I did a sip of my martini. And I hadn't realized that the bartender had made it like very strong.
Oh, okay.
But it was like a hammer to the head. And I had to go, oh, okay. There's 150 people sitting in front of me. Maybe I won't take a second sip.
Personally, I remember from Casino Royale, the one scene where he orders a bottle of Bollinger.
Yeah.
And I love champagne. I absolutely love champagne. Dry as a desert.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, I have to get some Bollinger now. So this is how big of a James Bond geek I am. Then I have fallen in love with it. Nothing else compares now.
Quite right. They did that nice 007 special one, which my family got me for finishing the book, which was really nice. When I finished writing the book, which was a kind of 2 a.m. moment, racing against the deadline. I'd had COVID. I had quite long COVID, and the sort of lasting symptom was the room spinning around me. So at the end of Double or Nothing, for people who read it, you'll see it's all quite frenetic, and the characters probably feel at many points like the room is spinning around them, because that was what was happening to me as I was writing. And then I finished and went and popped that champagne, and that was a very good moment.
Oh yes, I think I have that cask where you push the button, the bottle comes up. Oh, I love that. It's a Bollinger 2011, I believe, and it's just fabulous. If you have a chance, you need to drink that. Absolutely. All right. So as far as music goes, let's talk a little more about that. I can't imagine a Bond without music. You're thinking, the big orchestra with the brass and the strings, and it just captivates you. And then there's these pop music that is integrated into it, and they've always done a great job. Madonna, Tom Jones, Rita Coolidge, Paul, Wings, it just Sheryl Crow, Adele, Garbage, Duran Duran, Tina Turner. If it was up to you, and you're going to write this, you already wrote the book and maybe you're going to write the screenplay. If it goes to the big screen, who would you want, like, as a pop star, seeing that first iconic song that just, just labels it?
That's a really good question. I have two answers. The first is, I'm a massive Tom Jones fan. I saw him live for the first time last
very
summer.
Cool. Yeah.
In Edinburgh under the castle. It was amazing. So if Tom Jones wanted to do another one, and if I could be in the room with him while he recorded it, that would be sublime. My other answer is actually my friend Georgia, who's an amazing kind of drum-based pop star now. When we were in primary school, she would always say, I'm going to be a musician playing the drums. And I'd say, I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to write spy stories. And it's actually happened. So I'd ask her if she would write me a song.
Outstanding. So if time or money was not a consideration for project that you could work on, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. If time or money wasn't a consideration,
it's just a perfect world.
Yeah.
It's just a perfect world. You have all the time in the world.
Yeah. Well, I've just had another novel come out here, A Wild and True Relation. Just came out last week. I've been writing this book for 14 years. Wow. Obviously with other things in between, but it was supposed to be my first novel, and now it's come out, my third novel, and it's a kind of literary, historical, feminist smuggling adventure set in Devon in the 18th century. And it features real historical characters in sections who kind of pass on the smuggling story down the centuries. And one of them is Dr. Johnson. And he just features in a chapter or two. Dr. Johnson wrote the dictionary, and he's my spirit guide. And we launched the book in Dr. Johnson's house. And one day I would like to attempt to write his whole life as a novel. I think it would probably take 10, 20 years.
Okay.
So if I had time and money went into consideration, I would go and sit down in the British Library surrounded by papers and not come out for a long time.
Looking back on your writing career, because how long, I mean, you said you've been writing since you were 13, right? Or maybe before then, I don't know.
Yeah.
What advice would you have given, like, say, 21-year-old Kim? Mm-hmm. As far as the writing goes, or somebody else that's just starting out?
I was so lucky. I've been writing all of my life. And as a kid, I would say I want to be a writer. And I was so lucky that nobody in my family said to me, that's silly, or, well, you'll need a plan B, or that's no way to earn money. And so I guess that's just a bit of advice I'd give anybody who knows an aspiring writer, just to be encouraging and to say, put the work in and the passion in and see what happens. And because that dream can be a little bit delicate, and it means everything if you have people around you kind of encouraging you. So I guess that's something I'd say. But looking back to, when I was 21, I was just about to start my MA in creative writing. And I guess I would say, have faith in yourself. Because there were points where my faith was shaken, because I went from, I think this is probably true for lots of people, if you're creative as a kid and a teenager, and you do have that encouragement around you, and you have passion and play and permission to take risks and experiment and maybe get it wrong sometimes, that's okay. Then you go into a kind of institutional setting. So I studied literature with creative writing at undergrad, then I studied creative writing at MA. And then you'll have lots of people's opinions on you, and you'll have people saying it should be this way or it should be that way, or there's a wrong and a right way, and pressure will come in, and it can be easy to lose the faith and lose your sense of your own creative process and your own direction. So I think if I could go back and speak to myself, I would just say, have faith in yourself. And I came back to it, but it took a while.
Very good. So what's next for you? What's next for Kim?
Well, I am just finished the latest round of edits, or the first round of edits on the second 00 novel, which is a really interesting process, because typically you would work with one editor, but for this set of books, there's the US editor, the UK editor, and then the whole Fleming family. Giving me feedback. So it's a bit like a melting pot, you pour everybody's ideas and then you see what bubbles up. So I've just sent the manuscript back to them, and then we'll keep discussing ideas, and pretty soon I'll start writing the third 00 book. So it's all a go.
So for those who are thinking about doing collaborations, or have multiple editors like what you're talking about, or interests that have a little bit of control or say in the book, or want to, have some input, what's the easiest way to put all that together? Because that seems like a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it is. It can be challenging, especially if you are used to that one-to-one relationship.
Right.
What I found that's really helpful is to work out who in the group, if you're working with like a really big group of people, who in the group do you find it's helpful to say have a letter from, an editorial letter? Who do you find it's useful to sit down and have a Zoom cup of tea with them? Who do you find it's more useful to actually like go and have lunch in person and talk through ideas? Because everybody will bring something different to the team. And there'll be these touchstones for you who can offer different things in different moments when you need them. So it's about building relationships, I think, and that can be challenging, particularly, you know, if you're working at a distance from people, you know, if some of your team are in America, for example.
Sure.
But that's, I think, one of the blessings and silver linings of what we've all gone through in the last few years. You know, being able to have a Zoom cup of tea with someone.
Right. Absolutely.
Which probably sounds terribly British to your audience, but, you know, that can be a really great way to build those relationships. And I do think that the editing process in particular relies on relationships that have trust in them, because you're sharing your creativity with someone, and that's inherently vulnerable when it's in that raw stage.
Right. Okay. Well, Double or Nothing comes out in the United States on April 11th. Do you have anything else for us?
Oh, well, if people want to follow me, I'm at Kim T. Sherwood on Twitter and Instagram. I also have a newsletter on Substack, Girl with the Golden Pen, A Wild and True Relation. My next novel has just come out here in the UK as well. So if you want to order that from the UK, you can. That's a good swashbuckling adventure. And then the next 00 book will be with you soon. So if you enjoy Double or Nothing, you won't have long to wait.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Kim.
Thank you. This has been lovely.
This episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsor, Laterpress. Laterpress is a platform built to help authors declare independence. It lets authors create digital books and sell them directly to readers through a branded website. Laterpress is free to publish on and doesn't take any commission on direct sales. It's one of the most effective ways readers can directly support authors they love. Get started today at laterpress.com.
Do you guys remember the moment you realized your career took off or was about to take off, or there's that potential to take off, where you were and what you were doing?
It's like 20 minutes ago. I had that realization.
Just happened. I mean,
JD?
For me, like, you know, I wrote Forsaken, indie published the novel, Publishers Weekly put a story out on it. When that story hit and I saw the sales start going through the roof, that's when I knew that something big was happening. Getting the phone call from an agent, you know, for a big sale too, you know, with Fourth Monkey, that was a big moment for me.
I think because I had been writing sci-fi mostly at the front end of my career, and I had taken the dare to write a thriller on that podcast with Nick Thacker. When that hit, like suddenly that was like my big seller, and it was a sustained big seller. That's when it kind of clicked for me. I couldn't tell you the exact moment, but I know I was sitting in an RV in Colorado Springs when it happened.
So I think we've talked about this before, but I started writing serial fiction for Vella for Amazon when it launched. You know, just for fun. It's like a new thing. I'm like, I'll give it a try. I'm going to write this. And I'm not sure if my friend who I'm going to talk about right now listens to this podcast. So I'm sorry in advance if you're listening. But we were at a con. He's a traditionally published writer. He has quite a few books out. And he was interested in this and talking about, you know, finances. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'll share with you what I'm making. And he said, you're making more money than I am. And I just thought about that for a minute. And I went, huh. So I guess that was the moment I'm like, maybe this is working out. I don't know.
Well, I have not had a lightning strike moment. You know, I've had bumps in my sales, or where you're like, wow, this is cool. This could work. But I was at 20 Books, and I was at the Ram's Head bar with Cecilia Mecca and her husband Mike and a bunch of other people, and we were talking, and I didn't know them very well. She's a romance author. And she's got a great story because she was on track to becoming a professor. She went to Penn State And she was a teacher, and she got her doctorate while she was teaching, like during the day. She was going to night classes, got her doctorate, and she was going to be a professor. And then she started writing Scottish medieval romance. And I'm like, oh, please, come on. And her husband's like, no, look, he pulls out his phone and he shows me the numbers, and my jaw dropped. I'm like, holy, yeah, okay, this is a very real thing. And, first of all, an indie doing that well. And secondly, it's like, maybe, I don't know about the romance world, but holy cow, it's like a super niche thing. But man, right then and there, I was like, okay, this could actually happen. What do you guys do to prepare to write your books? Something, I was asking, by the way, Kim was just so much fun to interview. She's such a nice person. She was very, I've interviewed a lot of people, and she was fabulous. She was really, really fun. And it was a great interview. And I was asking her what she did to prepare. She's writing James Bond, so she read every James Bond book. She listened to all the music. She listened, she saw the movies, et cetera, et cetera. Is there something special that you guys do?
Probably the closest experience I've ever had is writing that prequel to Dracula, because I read everything that Bram Stoker ever wrote. I listened to the audiobook for Dracula on a constant repeat the whole time I was writing it, just to try and get his vocabulary and his cadence and that kind of thing into my head. I can totally see where Kim is coming from. Like, it would be so easy to immerse yourself in James Bond and just kind of, like, she was probably carrying a concealed weapon at some point, like you could go over the top so easily with that. But I think to write in that interview or that universe, I would probably have to do that too. I mean, the music and I definitely go back to all the Ian Fleming books, and I think she went about it the right way too. I mean, because Ian, he really did leave a lot of like dangling threads out there, things that he felt he was going to pick up later. He didn't close everything out in every book, so they've been mined quite a bit, but there's still a few out there. So you can go back through those, try and find something that he created and started but never actually finished, and use it as a takeoff point for whatever you're doing. I've got a couple friends at this point that have written it for the James Bond universe, and they all have nothing but really good things to say about the Ian Fleming estate and the family and everybody involved in that.
I was just jealous of her car writing. Okay. So I don't know. I don't think we've talked about this, but I'm a very big Formula One fan. And it was today that I learned that you can actually buy an Alpine car, which used to be Renault. I'm like, I thought those were just Formula One cars. Like, you can actually own one of those. And my brain just exploded. And then I went down this rabbit hole of looking up Alpine cars, but they don't have them here. I guess you have to go overseas to get them. So that was a disappointment.
How unfortunate. Yeah. In terms of prep, like I do similar things. I haven't like necessarily written in someone else's universe per se, but there have been times where I decided I want to write a book like author X. The current one is John Grisham. I want to write a John Grisham style book, not necessarily a legal thriller. I just want to ape his style a little and learn from him. So I embarked on reading, he's got 45 novels out and a whole bunch of short stories. And so I've been reading through his entire catalog and watching every interview that he's ever done and getting into his headspace. I've done the same thing with just about any author that I really admired and just devoured their entire body of work to pick up on the rhythm of how they do it and their word choices and things like that.
How about music? Here's the thing. I'm a big music guy. Last night, I actually watched Amazon Prime had a thing on 007 music. They went through all of the history of the different James Bond movies with the music. And it's like those movies would just be a shell if it didn't have that music. It is just such an integral part. It's so iconic. Is there a certain music that you listen to when you're writing, perhaps, or trying to get psyched up to like write a specific book?
I'm terrible. All I listen to is a thunderstorm soundtrack, so it's basically white noise the whole time I'm writing. Mainly because if I listen to music, that rhythm basically comes out in what I'm writing too. So if I'm listening to heavy metal, I'm going to write in a way that's going to sort of reflect heavy metal. If there's lyrics, forget about it. That would totally throw me off. The James Bond Bond stuff is very unique because, first of all, a lot of it's in minor chords, which I think a lot of people don't realize. But like, you could take a normal song, and if you play it in minor chords, it sounds like a James Bond song. So it immediately stands out. If you hear 10 songs on the radio and nobody tells you, most likely you can pick out the one that's going to either be from a James Bond movie or should be. So I think that's a big part of that. I've got a lot of friends though that do that. They'll create a playlist for a specific, the book that they're working on. A lot of them post it, online. Like, these are the songs I listened to while I was writing it.
Yeah, they do those Spotify playlists. I'm like you. I use a white noise. But with some exceptions. So it's something that I'm working on where just some of the chapters I'm trying to get them pretty dark and like on the horror side. And I was laughing because I listen to thrash metal when I'm writing those scenes. I mean, the vocals are so growl. I don't know what they're saying anyways, but yeah, I put the liquid metal on for those specific chapters while I'm writing.
Yeah, I listen to a ton of like lo-fi hip hop for just general writing. But when I've noticed that when I get to a point where I want some intensity in a scene, I switch to epic soundtracks, movie soundtracks that are like heavily dramatic. And there's tons of playlists for that on Spotify and YouTube. But yeah, it's actually interesting because I didn't know I was doing that for a long time, but it came up recently that, for general writing, I like stuff that's upbeat and energetic that keeps me going. And then when it's time to really kill somebody, I get the dramatic music going.
So for any of you, do you have a favorite Bond song, like a performer? I went down that rabbit hole when I was doing the research before I interviewed her. And I was just like, oh, that's right. Paul McCartney and Wings, Tom Jones. That's her favorite.
And Duran did one too, right? I think.
A View to a Kill. Yeah. Yes.
Even Adele did a Bond song.
She did.
I imagine for singers, it's a rite of passage, right?
I would think.
Hey, do you want to do it? It's like, do you want to do the Super Bowl halftime show? Do you want to write a James Bond song? It's one of those things I think every singer wants to check off their bucket list.
Well, they even put Madonna in one of the James Bond movies. She sang the theme, and then she had a short little thing that was like a fencing deal. I forget which James Bond movie that was, but she was in there. I totally geeked out with her on this. My favorite was Garbage because their recording studio was in Madison, Wisconsin, where I lived. And everyone was like, oh, it's on East Washington Avenue. Oh, that's it. It's just a brick building. You would have no idea it's a recording studio. And they used to be Firetown before they were Garbage. And that was like the band I'd go see when I was in college. So a little bit of memories there.
That's cool. I liked when she was talking about like her escape routes and stuff. That brought back some childhood because I used to do it, but not on the Bond side, more on the Q side. I'd always be like, how would I rig this so I could like send a secret message or like hide a weapon? So I totally identified when she was talking about that.
I do that now. When I'm at the DMV, I'm trying to figure out like, what can I use to get out of this place?
Yeah, I think everybody does that at the DMV.
I'm like Jason Bourne in that one scene where he's trying to figure out who he is, and he's like, I'm sitting here in this this particular booth. He took the one in the back with a view of the front door. Like he like basically every entrance, every exit, map it all out. Like I'm sort of that guy. Like I can't sit with my back to anybody in a restaurant.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, that's
that Vietnam history, man.
Yeah,
back in Nam.
It's like just basic survival.
Yeah, I found it interesting that, the Fleming family told her to modernize Bond and give it like a cast of characters. It's almost, it's like a Marvel movie, or, is it going to turn into that where you're going to have like 5 or 6 00s all working together? Because, old James Bond, he's a lone wolf. Yeah, Felix, the CIA guy, will interject every now and then. But for the most part, it's Bond trying to save the world from, X, Y, or Z. And now you have like this big cast of people. And I was looking at some of the reviews for the books, and there's a little bit of pushback with that.
Well, I think what's honestly going on there is, James Bond has been redone. What do we have now? 4 or 5 different versions of basically the same, like retelling of the same stories. And I think at this point, they're just being business savvy. They're realizing we need to branch out a little bit more. We can't go back to Casino Royale and start over with another actor. I mean, they could, and they might. But if they can come up with a 000, some new character that jumps out of that, that might be a second franchise or a third franchise. They had talked about a female James Bond, and that's been tossed around Hollywood. There's scripts that have been floating around forever, but nobody bites on it because, James Bond is James Bond. You can't just, put a woman in that particular part and call it a day. What they could do is have a female 00.
Sure.
That comes out of nowhere that somehow challenges it. Yeah. So like that's, and I think they're just looking for that. They're fishing for that iconic character that just hasn't been found yet. Just some kind of breakaway hit that can create another franchise.
Well, and there was a rumor like last summer that they were going to cast a female actress or someone as 007, not as James Bond, because the number is not necessarily that person. So, and that does make sense. I mean, from a certain standpoint, I think people are still going to be really, really upset.
Yes.
But if you did a kind of passing of the torch thing, people don't seem to be all that set at the idea of Indiana Jones passing the fedora along to someone else. So I think there's room for it.
Well, they did it in the last James Bond movie. There was, he lost a 007 designation. It went to a woman for a little amount of time, and they worked together, and then he eventually got it back. I think that was kind of their way of just kind of tongue in cheek saying, well, we did it, we tried it, but I don't think we're going to take it any further.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, maybe that's where that rumor came from. I didn't see that film.
See, I think Casino Royale broke a lot of ground because before Bonds were kind of cutesy or, tongue-in-cheek, it was kind of the same old story time after time. And if you remember the beginning of Casino Royale, this is Daniel Craig being introduced as James Bond, where he has to kill that guy and there's that fight scene in the bathroom. That's as gritty and James Bond was never that gritty before. He'd shoot somebody from a long distance. He'd poison them. He'd do whatever. This was hands-on. This is actually killing somebody. This is fighting for your life. And I was watching it and I was like all tensed up because if you've never been in a fight like that, you don't understand. And I was just like, holy shit, they're getting it right. I was in shock. And
well, that's actually, it's honestly, it's another Hollywood trick, for lack of a better word. I mean, they've done it with Batman, like if you think of the original Batman TV series, right. Every version of him gets darker and grittier and harder. They just did it with Superman to a certain extent. And I can guarantee the next Superman is going to definitely cross that line. It's going to be a much different Superman than we saw before. They're recasting Wonder Woman. It's going to be the same thing. It's basically Hollywood pushing the envelope, because if they don't change it up, if they give us, more of the same, people aren't going to flock to it, but they make that little bit of a tweak. It's a known commodity. Again, they know that it works. They know that people will be talking about it. But
I think they almost went too far with Daniel Craig. He just looked very unhappy, like the last couple of Bonds that he was doing. And, one of my friends is like, well, he's probably can't eat carbs. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. He's a very unhappy man because he's got to be like James Bond, for God's sakes. See, not eating carbs gets you very crabby, but he almost became too soft for me. James Bond is a loner. He's a womanizer. He's a loner. He's not a nice person. He's an assassin. It's for God and Queen or King, and everything else. He doesn't care. He uses people. Now all of a sudden he has feelings and this and that, and it's like, that kind of pushed me back a little bit.
It was a big change for sure as a Bond fan. I was like, because he's always had a flat arc, and they tried to give him an arc in the last movie and make him more of a family man. So it was definitely an interesting choice.
Right. But we'll see how all this plays out.
Yeah. So, JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got Brendan Novak. She's a New York Times bestselling author, winner of the National Reader's Choice Award, one of the Booksellers' Best Awards. Her 75th novel is coming out. It's called The Seaside Library, releases April 11th.
If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.